increasing significantly, that overall revenue per month is increasing. One thing that was interesting to note is that the federal level, have been in the process last couple of weeks of having confirmation hearings for the FCC, proposed FCC chairwoman. And in the process, there were some questions that were asked of her about her position with regard to whether these networks ought to be completely invaded with the private sector, or whether there was a proper role for government, city governments to help facilitate the expansion of broadband. And the question was asked in a challenging way, but she responded back and said, I think it depends on the situation. And then she said, for example, I'm paraphrasing, but one of the premier publicly funded, supported networks in the United States is Utopia out of Utah. So she actually, several times in her comments, used Utopia as a great success for expanding the reach of high-speed telecommunications for the benefit of people. And so her point was is that it depends on the situation. Sometimes government can do it best, sometimes private sector can do it best. But anyway, that was interesting that use that as one of the very best examples in the country.
Because really, you don't want to cut out the private sector, but yeah, it really depends. I mean, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Well, just because it's Christmas, and this is the only reason, you played a big part in making sure that came from a problem child to, and you'll deny it, and that's fine. But I know that once you guys, took over, then it changed. And that was probably the biggest thing that's happened to it. Had that not happened, it would be done and would be doing whatever we did previously. But you guys took it over and made the, what do you call it, AIG or something like that. So,
UIA.
AIG, it's all the same. It's just a couple of letters.
No Aggies here.
Yeah, but anyway.
Sorry, Tom.
No Aggies here. What are you talking about?
When you say Jim.
So anyway, thanks.
It's been great, yeah, thanks for this support. It's really the difference in the communities, the history in their own cities. Largely it's went the way of the political environment. And Layton, through all the ups and downs, was politically stable.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really the key to the success, is to provide that foundation, that background. Because you can see there's a marked difference in take rates and in feelings about it, just based on how the elected leadership responded to during the challenging times. And you always had questions, but there was always support to keep doing it, because we believe in the benefit of it. It's essential utility.
And it's proven out.
Yeah, it has proven out. But
beyond.
It's good thing.
Mayor Petro and I are on the audit committee. We met before this meeting with Rob, the independent auditor, as well as Doug Bellston and Dan Christensen, who are the citizen input, which we have about the highest level of citizen input on that from a professional standpoint we could ask for. So they're gonna, I know that that's on the agenda item here from this meeting, but the internal audit, the independent audit, provided an unmodified opinion, which was the highest level of recommendation. And there were no material problems with the way we go about doing our business. There were two compliance findings, but they were mostly situated around receiving a lot more federal funds than we were anticipating, additionally with the sales tax being up substantially from what we even imagined it would be as well. So again, just a lot of good professional work going on in the background. The mayor and I just kind of sit there and we're like, yeah, this sounds good. It sounds good to us. But that's why we have the professionals on the staff side, and that's why we have an independent auditor, and that's why we have two professionals from the auditing and regulation side of the business to be able to help us be able to understand the numbers and make sure we're doing things from the right. So I thought it went really well, and I think it shows that the city's in a good financial situation.
Yeah, I was very pleased, and I got to tell you, having the two gentlemen on the outside kind of join that team, I think is probably the best thing this committee, this council has done, and I'm excited. I want to say thank you for that, because I think not that we ever would question it too much, but it just kind of really just puts that even, it calms all the waters, let's say that, everywhere, knowing that, you've got many eyes on it and good professionals that are looking at it on both sides, so.
Did you know that, are you on the committee?
I'm the independent auditor.
Oh, are you? Oops.
Well, I don't sit on the committee, but I report to that committee.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. I was just wondering if we saw anything about a person buying a new suit for the audit. That wasn't in there?
That wasn't in there.
That means he did it on his own.
I can't audit every single transaction, so maybe we'll have to go back and look.
No, that's fine. Hey, what's a new suit?
Okay. Anybody else have any reports?
I still had one other item. We had the Utah League had their LPC, the Legislative Policy Committee
Monday?
meetings on Monday and gearing up for the legislative session. And Gary's already talked to us about some land use issues and the retail incentive bills and just some things that will be happening. But yeah, I guess we'll be ready for that. We have a meeting set up.
January.
Yeah, before the session starts with the area legislators, so.
So, if I may, Mayor, on that point, we would love to have, we have items that come out of the league that would like to emphasize, that they would like us to emphasize as part of a coordinated effort. But we also want to have any thoughts from you if there's something specific outside of what the league's talking about that's of your concern and it's related more specifically to us. We'd like to put those on the list as well. So any ideas you have, please send them to myself or Gary, and we'll, or Tori, and then we'll make sure that they get on the list of things to talk about with them.
Yeah, it's on the 13th of January, 7:30 in the morning.
Must be good.
So you put that on your calendar. Okay. Anyone else? We'll go ahead and then proceed to item number 2, which Mason. Mason, you're up. You're going to.
Excellent.
The review of the Case Creek Irrigation Company agreement.
So, as you recall, it's been a long time coming, and hopefully today is the day we get to put a bow on this. So, we wanted to report back to you because when you had originally voted on this and then given it to staff and to Case Creek to shepherd along through their shareholder process, they've accomplished that. Many of you know that if you didn't, they did. So some of you were there and saw it all happen. So in essence, Case Creek has voted to adopt the agreement that you had forwarded to them, but I, along with opposing counsel on the other side, made a couple of changes. And so there's sort of a moment here that we'd like to discuss it with you, see if it's acceptable and for ratification. So first, the transfer of the pressurized system, that it shall include all of Case Creek's rights, including the accounts receivable. So the question here is, well, if you're going to take over managing these people as your clients, if they already owe Case Creek, who are they going to owe? And it's the same thing for credits, is that if they have a credit in the system, and from what they were indicating, there is nobody with a credit in the system. But this hopefully captures that idea that if there's either a debit or a credit, then the city will just manage those accounts as they come to us. Does that make sense? So hopefully it's not too objectionable. This next one was really important. Yes.
Do they have anything internal that shows, assignment of change or change of ownership from Case Creek users now, what they would be anticipating? Not from this agreement, but from Case Creek and the user itself.
I need to make sure I'm understanding your question.
So, this is global, like us and Case Creek. I just want to know what particular things does Case Creek have with particular users in terms of how they go about collecting debts?
It's their yearly assessments.
Okay.
Yeah, their yearly assessments would just, it's a bit of a mishmash because what they'll have is, say, a farmer who wants to pay after the harvest, and he's flush with cash, or she, then some of them will pay post hoc. Others will prepay. And so we tried to formulate it in such a way that whatever comes to us, we deal with it as is, and we continue where it was left. That makes sense?
Yep.
Well, and along those lines, should they not pay, then get the use of their water.
Correct.
So they're motivated to pay.
Exactly. The next one is one that it sort of crept up as we were going through the audit of everybody who was a Case Creek shareholder. And Steve made Herculean efforts. I don't know if I could be superlative enough with how much he carried this ball. And he probably would never admit it, but honestly, it was hours and hours of lots of work working through all of the files and coordinating with Case Creek. And he produced what was called Exhibit B, as we had anticipated through the agreement, which listed everybody, their acreages, their parcel numbers, all of that. And so we found that this is just sort of the way water companies are. The records are not always spectacular, not always. And we're in the midst of dealing with somebody or negotiating with somebody who's in the APZ, and we're kind of haggling over, what was it, 0.04 acreage. We're just finding, and we knew that we were going to find, there are going to be little discrepancies here and here that as we go through this process, we want to make sure that we can capture those even after everything is decided. So we wanted to build in an escape hatch so that in essence, even though this agreement will be signed by both parties, we want to make addenda, but we don't want to have to bring it back to everybody for either a shareholder vote or for city council approval. So this delegates to the administrators, and the administrators are listed here, and it's going to be the city manager and the Case Creek president, that basically whenever we find that there are details that need to be updated in Exhibit B, say we find somebody that had an extra share, say we find out that it was being used in a certain way that we weren't expecting, say we find out that somebody in the APZ had cut themselves off from the water completely and it's now additional shares without being appurtenant to the ground, which is a situation that we discussed, then we should be able to go back and change that specific shareholder's data in Exhibit B. And to do so, it's going to have to be in writing, and it's going to have the signature of each administrator, and the notice has to be given to the persons, so if they need to, they can make an objection. Now, obviously, this is going to be done usually at their petition, so that they'll have notice already in that sense. Other than that, there weren't any other substantive changes. I did change the heading on Exhibit B to include I didn't highlight it, designated shares, but that was it. Any questions?
Nothing?
It's interesting, the shareholder vote was, those who voted at least, was probably every shareholder was essentially a 90% in favor. And so there was good discussion and good support from the shareholders for the change. That was positive.
The mayor helped with this, so we appreciated that.
So I can attest to the fact that everyone was accounted for and classified as far as, or it was, because they divided it up, they either had a 1/3 and a half or a full share, is how their vote was counted. So they needed to take that into consideration to come up with a percentage, and that's what they came up with, 90% in favor.
You were counting that as joint venture on the individual or joint venture on the...
I was there as a no, I wanted to be at the meeting, and I asked, and so that's why I was there. And then since I wasn't a shareholder, and I was glad that they asked me to count, because it really attests to, for us as well as the citizens, that yeah, it was accurately counted and everything was there and balanced out.
I'm sure acting like it's historic. Maybe sometime with the party.
Maybe a firecracker go off.
Okay, it's been a long time coming, I mentioned that before, so. Anyway, all right, we can move on.
Okay.
Tracy, you're up.
Great. So tonight, we're here to report our comprehensive annual financial report, to share that with you. You all should have seen in the Dropbox the actual full report. And I also have with me Robert Wood with his audit firm here to talk about the audit reports that were issued. First, we'll just go through a little bit of the numbers. As far as revenue goes, some of the areas that were big, if we look at actual, these are actual 2020 to actual 2021. The big winner, sales tax up 3.2. I'm not sure if that's a winner on a personal basis, but it's a winner as a city, right? We're all paying much more than what we were before for the items that we're buying, and so that's why that number is going up the way it is. We have, as a city, had some successes in adding some good businesses to our community that have also contributed to that. So the other item that's of note is a significant amount of federal money that came into the city. And so that sits in our general fund. And so overall, our revenues from one year to the next, 9.1 million. Of course, 6.5 million of that related to federal funds. And all cities across the state saw that.
Is that some of the first tranche of the ARPA?
This actually doesn't include the ARPA funds. This goes back to the CARES Act. So this is CARES Act funding that came into the city, right? So in the next,
Still more to come.
in November, we pulled the first tranche of the ARPA funds. That was 4.5 million. And then next fall, we'll pull the rest of that, right? And if there's any questions about any of this as we go, this is just a similar slide. I sent these out to you guys so that you can see them in advance. And so again, this kind of shows you actual, but then budget, so that you can see budget numbers and budget to actual, how we compared. Some of these other taxes, franchise tax, that one's mostly going down because of Comcast, which we just got done talking about Utopia, and so that kind of makes sense, right? That revenue stream would go down because the number of users is going down as people join on to Utopia. Telecommunications, again, the transition, I would think by now everybody got rid of a landline, but there still are some out there. And so that continues to be affected.
Utopia.
Then on the expenditure side, we can look at 2020 actual and then 2021 budget to actual. And we can see that overall, the city underspent the budget by 2.9 million. If we take wages out of that, or we consider that almost half of it was related to wages, and that goes back to our conversation of, if you walk down to the HR, just outside of HR, there's an entire screen full of open positions, and it's just been rotating through different ones for the last year and a half. But that attributes a lot to why we have excess wages in some of these divisions and departments.
That's particularly C, I just had a question on C and D, why that one was significantly higher than the others. Is that particularly to employment?
In CD?
Yeah.
And what was the question again, sorry?
Just that why it was a little bit higher percentage than the rest. In terms of that we budgeted for 2 million and we only spent 1.5 million.
Oh, some of that relates to, they're the ones that are managing the Department of Defense grant, and that grant has continued to run through this fiscal year. So at the end of 2021, which was back in June, most of that grant had not been spent yet. It got delayed by almost a year, I would guess, because of COVID. So that's why that budget is in there in that situation. If we look over here, so if we considered non-wage, and we also had open purchase orders at the end of the year. So non-wage, about 1 million under. Now, if you remember the directive at the beginning of 2021, because we were still, that was July 1st of 2020, which was right in the heat of the start of COVID. The direction from management was for everybody to just, hold your horses and make sure that the world isn't going to fall apart before we go spending a bunch of money. So, that leads to some savings in areas because people just held back, responsibly. given the time period we were in. So if we look at the general fund, overall revenue 49.5 million, actual expenditures 36.4 million. That's a 13 million difference. We had from June of 2020 a spendable fund balance of 11 million, and so our spendable fund balance at the end of the year 24 million. We do have some fluctuations in restricted and assigned accounts that get taken into effect. So we end up at 22.4 million. That's 45% of revenue. And so that's one of the findings that was mentioned that our auditor will talk about, is that we're over the state limit of 35%. Now, if we look at what we budgeted, we have carryover purchase orders and also budgeted use of fund balance on a variety of projects and large pieces of equipment of 4.2 million. So we can subtract that off because we've addressed this over reserve issue. And that brought us down to 35.8, which is still a little bit high. But then as we discussed in the audit committee meeting, we know back in September, we made fairly significant adjustments to wages with cost of living increases and so forth. And so that should bring us well under, I didn't perform the actual calculation, but it should bring us well under the 35% limit, more in the mid 25% range, I would assume. When we went into the budget, we expected this percentage to be around 13%. Keep in mind, we were preparing and passing this budget right at the first of COVID. So, we didn't really know where we were going to end up at. In our other funds that are out there, enterprise funds, just to look at what our reserves are in each of those funds, water moved from 9.3 to 13.1 million. Some of that, will be handled with this agreement that was just talked about, right? Because we have a large number of secondary water projects that have been on, kind of on the waiting game to get this agreement signed and to get underway. And so I'm sure Steve would be able to tell us that, a good chunk of this will be able to be spent now and bring that reserve to where we want it to be. And it's good that we have it so that we can accomplish those projects. That was the intent of rate increases a few years ago. Stormwater, we have healthy reserves in that fund and they've grown. We also have a number of projects, in the works and on the 5-year plan related to those. Sewer, actually reserve down a little bit. One thing about the sewer fund that's important to note is we as a city have not had a rate increase in the sewer fund. I'm not quite sure when the last one was. I would say it was at least 20 years ago, our side of it. And part of the reason for that was a few years ago, the North Davis Sewer District went through a series of about 5 or 6 years where they more than doubled the rate. The bulk of that we just collect and pass through to them. Our share of it is minimal, but our share of it has also not been increased for a long time. And we're in a position now where, it's starting to eat at the reserves a little bit rather than having those at least stay equal or go down. Our refuse fund is in good position.
And sewer is one of the things that we can spend ARPA
funds
on.
It is. So as we come with projects, we may focus on areas where we perhaps want to not have a rate increase. And so if we use some of that money on some of those type of projects, that would help that situation. The swimming pool fund sitting in a healthy position, considering, they had a lot of trauma with the whole COVID thing as well. I'm kind of hoping that by next year we won't have to use that word anymore. It has, kind of rollover effects. Street lighting fund in good position. There's a number of projects that got carried over from one year to the next, and so that reserve is higher than I would anticipate it, but most of it's going to be, our year ends on June 30th, and it's right in the middle of construction season, so it, doesn't always give the best picture.
But that shows the rate increase.
Yeah, right. Emergency medical, important to point out that I would say about $1 million of this 3.9, maybe even a little bit more than that. It's hard to calculate an exact number, is related to the pension plan. So the emergency medical fund is the major area where in the retirement system they have what's called a net pension asset. And so as the retirement fund does better, we have to reflect that in this particular fund. So, you know, it gives a little bit, and the way the accounting standards handle it, I don't necessarily agree with, because it gives us a little bit of a false sense, right? That maybe we have $1 million to $1.5 million more in here that we really don't have, because if the market was to turn around this next year, we'd have to take that off our books. Anyway, probably more explanation than you wanted, but that's where that sits. We did have a deficit last year in the athletic fund. We fixed that, and then they turned some things around, and the way we account for things brought that back into a healthy position. And secondary water to this point has only been a contract to basically bill Weber Basin for our expenses plus a little, and so that puts us in that position. Our other governmental funds, not to go into too much detail, but are all in a good position. Capital projects fund, a big chunk of this money relates to the fire station, and the fact that that'll be underway here this spring, I assume, and so that'll spend $4 million or so of that fund, and then there were just a number of other large projects out there yet to be completed as of June 30th. Down in the ramp revenues, I like to point those out. This again reflects the about 19% increase in sales tax during this time period. And I do notice on this slide I should have changed these to 21, so apologize for that. That would be 21, not 20. Probably for this meeting, I don't know that we'll go through the sales tax slides that I have. I'll just turn a few minutes over to Rob and he can hit his reports. And I did send those sales tax slides out to you though, so that you could see how they looked. So, Rob?
Pleasure to be with you this evening. Thanks for the invite. We have completed our audit of the city. It's been a very thorough detail. As you can see from this book, it's not a little small financial statement. There's a lot of stuff to go through, but we've provided a detail of those. I mean, even fixing periods, commas, numbers, dollar signs, name it. Because really one of the things that pointed out in the book, the reason that we do such a great job is you actually submit this to the GFOA for a certificate of achievement in excellence in financial reporting. Now, I don't know how many years in a row you received this, but it's probably well over 20, maybe even more. I know like Murray City, who I audit, they just received their 41st award. So there's a lot of cities that care about the financial statement and what it looks like and so forth. So we've gone through those. So really in our book in pages 7 through 11, it's the independent auditor's report. It's already Zach referred to it earlier, it's an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion that I, as an independent auditor, can give your organization. Really what it means is we don't feel there's any material misstatements in the financial statements. And obviously I can't test every single transaction and dollar and so forth, but we do a lot of sampling and audit techniques, working with your outside parties, vendors, suppliers, bondholders, all that type of stuff to confirm what they have. Tax revenues, property taxes through the county, sales tax revenues through the state tax commission, and so forth, to confirm those in order to come up with our opinion on the report and whatnot. So it's the best opinion I can give your organization. We feel the funds that Tracy just went through are properly stated, all operating in a healthy balance. One of the other items that got reported in the back of this book is the compliance section. Now in the compliance section, there's 2 reports that we as independent auditors issue your organization. The first report is on your internal controls over financial reporting, on your compliance with laws, regulations, and so forth, whether they be federal, state, local, what have it. Really with the internal controls over those issues, we didn't notice any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that need to be reported to you as the governing body. There is 2 compliance issues. Tracy's already referred to one of those. The fund balance being at 45.4% in the general fund. Obviously that's well over the 35% and whatnot. But I, as an independent auditor, that's actually our favorite finding to give you. To say, hey, you got a bunch of excess cash or whatnot, or fund balance, you can go out and start funding some of your project, which you've already done in the fiscal year 22 budget. So that one, it's a technicality, it's a finding from the state level, but it's also one that allows you as a council to say we can do more projects here in the city to benefit our community and the residents thereof. The second finding referred to not only in this report but in the last report is our your compliance with the state audit, or sorry, the state compliance audit guide issued by the state auditor's office. So there's requirements in there that they have us test each year, and there's certain requirements that they have us test on a 3-year rotation basis. So on page 146, it really shows, we look at your budgetary compliance, which is you adopting a budget, making sure you stay under budget on your funds that Tracy talked about. We have positive savings on each of our funds, except one of our findings, we'll talk about that one. One fund did not. Your fund balance percentage, we've already talked about that one in the general fund. Your fraud risk assessment presentation that gets done to you by council after these guys prepare a report and say, here's where we're standing from an internal control standpoint. You scored like 375 out of 395, is it 395 points?
Yeah, I think so.
So you only missed a few points on that thing. So per the state, you're classified as a very low risk entity. You've got good controls and procedures here at the state. And then obviously enterprise fund transfers, reimbursements, loans and services, and how governmental fees and whatnot are done. The final finding that we have is the fund that went over on their budget is the Davis Metro Narcotics Strike Force, which you as a city manage as a conglomerate of the local sheriff's office and other police departments here in Davis County, but you guys manage it, you set their budget. The reason they went over, they actually received a federal grant that got picked up as revenue, but the budget, salary and expenses did not get amended completely to absorb how much additional overtime was spent. So it's not like they went out there and just said, we're going to ignore it. They had a revenue source to do it. It just didn't get picked up in the budget amendments and whatnot. So that went over by $7,538 from your final appropriation to their actual. So not material, but really this is did they stay under budget or not? There's not really a gray area that I can say. If it's like $1, yeah, we can say that's a rounding issue. $7,500, I couldn't round that one. I tried. But appreciate everything that you as a council, city management, the departments. I mean, I do a thorough job, interviews and so forth throughout the thing. Steve Jackson probably just loves when I come. He gets a lot of the brunt because he spends a lot of money, but he does his department down there does well in managing the stuff, making sure this stuff is documented, so it makes my job easier, but it is a lot of stuff to review. And now he's got $4.5 million in ARPA funds, so Steve, maybe I need to come see you earlier.
Yeah.
But appreciate the hard work that everybody in this room dedicates to making sure the city's running in the way that it should.
Any other questions related to any of that?
Yeah, how come you didn't get 100%?
Well,
Just
you
guys,
know,
they're pretty tough guys.
still an A.
Okay.
So we had a few minor adjustments as we went through the statements from when I got the trial balance to some stuff. Some of the stuff is procedures that we've changed, but there's also another report that we haven't had quite time to finish. With the CARE money and the other federal sources that you have, there's a single audit requirement. You had that last year. We ended up not finishing that till the end of the year, basically because the CARES Act, we didn't get final guidance on that, on what the federal government wanted us to test, till December 22nd of 2020. It's like our reports are due to the state by the end of December. We have no time to do that. So we did your single audit in the first of the year. We're working on, actually, Gary can attest, I was in his office bugging one of his people all day on the VOCA grant. But really, from our standpoint, I don't have any findings that are come on the single audit. You guys have met the compliance requirements. Now it's a matter of me just doing the final documentation, making sure I can issue those with, I'm guaranteed it's going to be a clean opinion with no qualified costs. But that report will come here in the next couple weeks.
Great.
So we'll finish that up.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
both.
guys.
That was a good report. Okay, we're moving right along here. We want to have this discussion on Title 9.44.070, the city parks. How's that? Mr. Price is gonna update us on that.
Can I start out?
Yeah, sure.
Let me just give a brief explanation to you of why we're bringing this back to you. And by the way, this is Katie Ellis, and Katie is one of our assistant city attorneys in the department. I want you to get to know her a little bit.
She's awesome. She comes to us from Kaysville. We stole her away, which
Rescued her.
was a good rescue. That's could be turned to rescue.
They just got beat.
I'm not saying that.
But we're grateful.
There are certain people from Kaysville that I thoroughly like. Very few.
Every once in a while, so. Well, you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the photographers down the park and the problem that's there. Our job, of course, as staff is to try and come up with answers for you. Be able to come up with the best answers that we possibly can. And at the time, I remember Dave had run by some of the alternatives that he was going to recommend to you that night. And we looked at those and thought, yeah, those will work. Those are pretty good. You know, some involve permitting. I mean, there were a number of options that you could have snagged onto that night. That night, what ended up happening was, I think, somebody recommended, which is fine, that we just do a total prohibition in those parks where you've got environmental issues, because that is definitely a governmental purpose, is to protect the environment of those key environmental parks, you know, like the ones around the dam or the ones around the trails, that type of thing. And at the time, it should have clicked, but it didn't click with me. But we went back and I told Katie, work with parks to get an ordinance together on this. And she did a little bit of research. Of course, attorneys, they go out and they take a look at what exists out there. And she began to find a problem that existed. Wherever there was a total prohibition, there was also a lawsuit regarding it, and the lawsuit was generally lost by the municipality unless it was accompanied by certain terms. And so I thought this might be a good thing for her to talk to you about, because it involves First Amendment rights on public ground. And I thought, you know, let's do two in one. You'll get the best training that you've ever had from Katie, and you won't have to listen to my voice. But then in addition to that, we'll follow up with Dave to come up with some good ideas to accomplish the same thing that you wanted to accomplish, but just without that total prohibition, which seems to be the issue with the federal courts. They don't like that. Anytime you totally prohibit something, it's a flag that goes up halfway. And then if it involves some type of protected right, it goes up the rest of the way. And that's kind of where we ended up. And I appreciate Katie's research on it, because we would not have, probably would have just gone merrily forward and put it forward if she hadn't caught it. So I'm going to leave the time, or give her the time to be able to explain to you a little bit about what we're talking about.
Yeah, sometimes the pesky Constitution just gets in the way. It's so annoying, but we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So there are some really great rights we have in the First Amendment, and one of those, as you know, is that the government cannot abridge the freedom of speech. The Supreme Court has defined what free speech is, and they said if there's a message to be communicated and an audience to receive that message, that is protected. And there are some specific cases that say that includes commercial photography and videography. A couple of important points about the case law for First Amendment is that free speech rights are the strongest in public forums, and parks are a public forum. And that content-based regulations are the ones that are most likely to be found unconstitutional. So if you're prohibiting a certain type of speech, that's probably going to be a problem. But that doesn't mean that you can never regulate speech even in public forums. But the courts have said that you need to have a compelling government interest and that it needs to be narrowly tailored. So basically you have to just have a really, really good reason to do it. And of all the ways that you can do it, you need to choose the one that restricts speech the least. Some of the specific cases say that environmental protection is a compelling government interest, and that protecting the safety and convenience of public land users is a public interest. So I think we could use both of those interests to do what we want to do. As far as being narrowly tailored, a complete ban on commercial photography, there's been a case outside of our jurisdiction, so it's not binding on us, but it's a good indicator of what a court might do in our jurisdiction, that a complete ban on commercial photography was unconstitutional. The type of restrictions that are okay are time, place, and manner restrictions. And this could include permits, but you have to include ample alternatives for communication. So that's kind of some of the basics. I think Dave wanted to talk about maybe where we could go from here, but if you have any questions on the legal side, I'm happy to answer questions.
So, under the time, place, and manner, so the federal parks, national park system, drone photography is outright banned, period. But because they allow on the ground commercial photography, is that how they get around?
Yeah, so they have an ample alternative, and that was
Okay.
probably just like the least restrictive way that they could do what they needed to do.
Okay.
So we're saying that photography is content-based, just a blanket prohibition on photography doesn't sound like it's content-based to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify it as content-based, but it is a protected free speech.
It's communicating.
And so it's in a public forum, so we're still gonna the courts are gonna scrutinize that really heavily. I put that content-based point in there just because that's something that comes up a lot in government, and you need to think about that when you,
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking of
yeah.
banning photography seems very, like by definition, content neutral, because we're not caring what you're taking a picture of.
Yeah, but you're banning like a whole
So maybe
sphere of speech.
so the speech that we're abridging as a city in prohibiting pictures is any speech that wants to be done that we're not providing a time, place, and manner restriction.
Can I explain something?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually the courts have gone the opposite direction of where you're headed. What they've said is, you know what, you guys, if you have to describe what it is, then you probably, and identify what you're exempting, and it's something that could possibly pertain to free speech, then you're probably going to be in trouble prohibiting it outright. And they've gone some courts have gone the opposite direction. I don't think we'll go this far, but they've said, let's take the word photography out, because photography is a means of communicating. Whether it's a family picture or whether you decide you want to take your political pictures down in the park, it is a form of communicating with other people. And if you identify the speech aspect of a commercial venture as being the thing you're prohibiting, you got a problem. However, some courts have said if you cover any commercial venture down in that area, you're completely safe. You're good. If you treat all commercial ventures the same. But the instant you start to describe the type of commercial venture by something that is connected to the First Amendment, then you start to cross a line, and you got to be very careful not to cross that line too far. So almost the exact opposite of what you were asking, Zach, which is why photography? You know, why can't photography doesn't to you maybe seem free speech when you're going down there taking pictures of a family or whatever, but then you'd have to ask the question, what are you going to use this for? Are you going to use it for a commercial purpose or a purpose, political purpose, or a family purpose? Or that's the reason photography lends itself to being protected by the First Amendment, is because you literally have to ask what it's for, and it's tied to it could be tied to some First Amendment rights. So they've said a general ban on photography is not a good thing. In fact, they said, some of the courts say that you need to go one step further and just say you need to ban, or that the controls or regulation that you impose should be on all commercial uses and don't just focus on photography. Does that make sense, or is that I know it's kind of annoying.
No, I'm not annoyed that the government should be restricted. I have a hard time with the analysis, that's all. So.
And it's interesting. I would not, and the reason that 2 weeks ago I didn't think about it was because I would not have categorized photography as commercial photography as being a right, a First Amendment right of any sort. But if you think about it, it could be, and if you have to ask the question, then you're likely in violation of the Constitution.
Well, I'm sure we'll find with options that will be presented about how we want to accomplish it and whether or not trigger any sort of litigation. Where was the case law at where this wasn't, you said it wasn't,
There's a couple.
wasn't persuasive to us, and where was it at?
There was one in Washington DC, and then the other one was in Missouri, the two that were most on point to this issue.
So it'll be a case of first.
Impression of the state. We did.
I gotta tell you, great research. Thank you for doing this, because I mean, I'd rather be safe than
We
sorry.
did go around and look at all we looked at everything that controls photography in the state.
Uh-huh.
None of them outright prohibited. And I think they probably all came to that conclusion the same way we did. You know, even some of the toughest places, you know, like downtown St. George and Snow Canyon in St. George and up at the parks, you know, some of the parks around here. The nice thing about it is that we do have other alternatives for people, right? They can go to these parks here. But, so anyway, I think we've got some answers for you that will accomplish the same thing, but probably not get us in trouble.
So I'm just kind of hung up on the word commercial. So can you ban amateur photography at these places, knowing that they don't have the proper training and, you know, it's not their, I don't know, it's not their job, and, you know, people that are commercial, they're trained and they have licensures and all of that. So, or is by commercial photography any photography?
If you go back to this definition, I think we would get in trouble with any type of ban, yeah. Because there's a message to be communicated and an audience to receive that message. As we talked about this as an office, we have another attorney who always has a funny story, and he told a story about being at the river, and there was a photographer there that said, oh, we're just gonna do this picture, and it's a divorce picture. And this lady was there burning wedding dresses, and they were taking pictures of it. And I'm like, that's the perfect example that they're trying to communicate a message. So you just, even if it's a message that this family is really cute, I think it's a message.
So if I could, to kind of bring us back.
But you want your piano in that message. That's the game.
I think an important point is, and you understand it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Talk about, is that our staff's position hasn't changed with regard to the need to address this issue. It's a serious issue, and it needs to be. We're just saying we need to use a different tool, and hopefully with your input, we can come up with another tool that'll be equally as effective, but not run the risk. So it's not that anybody's moved away from the idea that this is a real problem and needs to get addressed in an aggressive, direct way, but we think there's tools to do that. So I'm sure you understood that. I just wanted to make sure that this is not a change of position on our part. Just doing it the right way.
Perhaps an interesting sidelight is that we've had contact from photographers, or at least a photographer, who has said, hey, you know, we understand these standards, they're all over the state. Can we have input on, you know, how those standards are created and what the costs are and you know, what the penalties are and that type of thing. So it's kind of interesting that even the photographers themselves recognize that they can be and should be limited in certain areas. So.
Well, we haven't, we want to talk in this meeting. This hasn't been a public, this is a public meeting, but not a public meeting. So, I mean, we've only heard from the neighbors by the park and not photographers. We've got plenty of those, but
Right.
just talking publicly, not making decisions in this meeting for everybody. It's got to be a public process. Not you're saying not, we're saying it's not, but.
I think what Alex said is right on mark. Just to reiterate, we're still committed to this. Staff is still committed. I think the city council is. We'll come back with some recommendations in the future.
Oh, so you don't have any solutions tonight?
No, we
had some ordinances prepared, some beginning of some proposed language, but what we didn't want to do, we thought would be unfair, is to make you aware of the obstacles that we've encountered, and then to throw something in front of you, and you have 10 minutes to talk about it or think about it, and say, okay, do you want to adopt it tonight, kind of a thing. And so and with the other items that are on the agenda, we just took the position, we want to make you aware of it, make you aware that we're working on some ordinances we think will work. Some of those are similar to what we've talked about before, and there's some residents here We intend to bring it back to you at the next meeting and just start a robust discussion on it.
Well, and Dave, thank you for connecting with Natalie. I think getting a true professional's opinion, and she provided those, or at least in my email, provided resources, links to, federal guidelines and all kinds of stuff in national parks and stuff like that. So I think she's going to be a great resource, and hopefully, maybe some input in how best to draft ordinances too, so.
We've reached out to her, we've talked to other
Yeah.
photographers.
I think in the end, we need these two to kind of protect us some.
Well, what we can do, I think, is we can compile just an idea with Dave of some of the things that have worked, not only in Utah, but around the area that may be helpful to you. And, that there's permitting, there's, really, what you gotta
Hours of
do is,
operation.
yeah, you
That'd be part of
focus
it.
on what you're trying to get to. Yeah, hours of operation
Yeah,
numbers.
I think that's
Fees, all kinds of stuff.
So you're looking at trying to regulate the impacts, right? Stop the impact that you have down there. And so those are the things that most of the other cases actually address. One permit for somebody for so many minutes and
So-
only at certain hours and no great big
Yeah.
Pianos.
fanfare, that type of thing.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ideas that we could pull from those cases that would be helpful.
So the question is, as you do your research, I guess you can kind of then come back with some solutions regarding the timing and the impact of the neighbors, because that's the biggest thing, is how bad this impacted the surrounding neighbors and all the traffic jam and all that. So, I think we need to take their concerns into consideration on all this, which I know you are, but I just want to make sure we kind of find the right balance here.
Well, and I think it impacts other people trying to utilize the park too,
Yes.
not just necessarily the residents. And I shared with Natalie about a recent experience I had out at the Shoreline Preserve, where there was a photographer out there taking the entire boardwalk. And you can't step off the boardwalk, you're in, to go around it. So I had to wait till they were done with their shoot. So they were impacting somebody else who's trying to utilize the facility, and that needs to be monitored and stopped as well. They're not a problem, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike, again, thanks for doing the research and bringing this to the forefront for us. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is an agreement between Lake City and Holmes Creek Irrigation, and Mr. Jackson will present that to us.
Guys, for no hands. All right, so we have an opportunity tonight to talk about a project that Holmes Creek Irrigation is proposing to take on. And as a city, it's a critical component to our water master plan that we have adopted and we're working towards. So I know we just finished talking about Case Creek, but we're going to switch over now and talk about Holmes Creek Irrigation for a minute. So Holmes Creek Irrigation has a reservoir outlet pipe that they have proposed to replace a portion of because of the age of the pipe and also some maintenance concerns they have. It's becoming more and more difficult to maintain because of the age of that pipe, and they've got some leaking joints and other things that they need to get fixed. So they've talked with their board and discussed the possibility of only replacing just a portion of the outlet pipe from Gentile up into the area to the east with an 18-inch pipe, or to replace the entire section from Gentile up to the base of their reservoir. Talking about it financially and other things, there was a lot of considerations that they had for whether or not they would go all the way to the reservoir or not. And at that point, we were made aware of the project because Wes Adams, our water supervisor, sits on that board, and he said, hey, we really ought to talk to the city because this is a critical component of the water master plan that the city has, and we should put in the right size pipe if we're going to do this in a future growth scenario. And so instead of putting in the 18-inch pipe that they would need, we talked to the city about possibly sizing that pipe. So just kind of some project background. The city owns 179 shares of Holmes Creek Irrigation, which is equivalent to 530 some odd acre feet of water. Our master plan projects that we'll end up with almost 1,000 acre feet of water as the transition for that water takes place over the time. The city did receive a dividend check from Holmes Creek Irrigation due to some water shares that they had that they sold in February in the amount of $344,000. And so we're proposing to reinvest that money back into the system. And the added reservoir to be able to serve as additional volume that would be then sent down through the secondary system out to the west. So a map showing that project, there's the project 19 and then project 20 is a second phase of that would allow that water to be utilized in the system. The project cost for 19, the project we're talking about is project 19. The estimated cost of that in 2025 was $800,000, and the cost for project 20 is $804,000. It's approximately 4,700 feet of pipe that we're talking about purchasing. So the cost of that is $260,000. Right now, prices have been going up. In the last 3 months, we saw a 6% increase in the pipe costs alone. So we're hoping that we've locked in a price if you approve this agreement that we'll be able to take advantage of a substantial cost savings with that. The city would own and maintain that reservoir outlet pipe. And then we would provide the engineering, design, and construction management services for the project. Essentially, Wes is heavily involved with that as a board member, but also we've had some engineering assistance with designing the pipe. So Holmes Creek would fund the fusing and installation of that pipe at a cost of $135,000, but they would own and maintain the reservoir outlet control structures and the emergency relief valves. So basically they would have all the control over the water from the reservoir, and the city would just own and maintain that pipe that comes out of the reservoir so that we could better utilize our capabilities to keep that pipe in operating service as we integrate that into the whole master plan. So just some images. The project would start about East Gentile, just east of the old East Gentile tank site there in south of Peacefield, and it would come up and then it travels behind the homes up through the hollow, continues along through actually current city property that we already have. There's an existing pipe through there, and then it just kind of runs through the gully up there. I guess it's not a gully, it's a huge ravine where the Holmes Creek travels through, and then the ownership of the pipe would begin in Layton City, everything west of that to Gentile, and then Holmes Creek would own from the outlet to this structure. So are there any questions I can answer about that project?
Is that diameter what we had initially spec'd out in the water plan several years back? A few years back? That's...
Yeah, that's the plan, is that we're trying to not come in 3 years after they replace the pipe and then say, oh, by the way, we need to upsize that pipe a second time. And so that's what the master plan calls for. It build out as a 24-inch pipe there.
And that 24-inch then is what we're anticipating the maximum volume would need going forward, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be the maximum volume that we would anticipate from this reservoir.
The size of the ditch, I mean, obviously it changes because it's bigger pipe.
Yeah.
But does the labor change?
Not necessarily. Yeah, it's the same track row bucket, and then it's the same, work to fuse it. Basically,
basically we're just paying for the pipe.
We're buying the material and they're putting in the pipe,
right?
And it saves them future maintenance costs because the pipe will be a fused pipe, so it won't have joints that trees and things can get roots in and whatnot, but it'll also allow the pipe to be pressurized. Right now, it's just a gravity-fed system.
So this is the connection we're talking about.
This
is the connection we've been talking about, the reservoirs.
Yeah, between the two reservoirs, it's a portion.
Yeah.
It's a portion of the connection to get to Andy Adams with this pipe. There is Project 20, which is the green pipe there. The other connection that I think we've talked about a lot with Dawn is this connection over here. It's number, I think that's an 8. My eyes are not.
Maybe a 6.
Is it a 6?
I think it's a 6.
Okay, sorry, it's a little small for me, but there is another portion that we're programming into, like Tracy mentioned, that reserve fund that we have is to build some of this pipe as well as the pipe that connects all the way out west down Gordon, which is this purple pipe that continues to the west.
So 19 and 20 are connected there.
So 19 and 20 connect together. The portion that we're talking about is only to get to Project 19 essentially, and then 20 would take it all the way into the reservoir. And then 21 is a second pipe that would run out of Andy Adams, but that's projected to not be needed until 2020 or 2040, excuse me.
Zach, you take care of
So Steve, I'm happy to see some of these projects move forward. Just a little bit of a question is, so who will be overseeing it all? They're paying for the installation, but is the city going to oversee the installation, or they, or?
So our agreement is to provide that engineering, design and construction management so that we can ensure that it's installed to the city's standards that we would expect.
So the numbers are quite a bit less. Has it been bid out, or are they ready to go, or?
Yeah, those are actual numbers from contractors that we got, and then the pipe price, like I said, is the current pipe price. I believe they're holding the price for another week for us. If you approve it, then we're off to the races because they have about a month lead time right now, and then the anticipation is that they would do this winter to have it ready for the April water season. And we felt like with the dividend that we received, we weren't expecting it. It felt like it was a good thing to reinvest that in that system as well as take advantage of what could be a very substantial cost savings. I know that the other Project 20 is going to cost, it's going through roads and other places that are going to be a substantial cost to get it there.
No, it makes sense to reinvest that dividend and stuff, so.
Yeah.
How many Holmes Creek users do we have in the city?
This general area is kind of the Holmes Creek area, but they're all currently on flood ditch water.
Okay.
So it's not pressurized.
Okay.
This project could potentially, right now the master plan is not calling for a build out of a pressurized system, but as we rebuild portions of the system, there are pipes that they might be able to line and pressurize, and so it's kind of a heavy lift with existing roads and other facilities.
But that's really not on the city. The city's main point is to get that water to Andy Adams.
Yeah, to use our water to focus on the system out west that we proposed.
It's good progress as far as I'm concerned. Very good.
But yeah, it was slated for 2025. We felt like 3 years is not really that big of a window to squabble over if we can make it happen and make it work for everybody in the future. So.
Especially with the increase in materials and labor and everything that's we're all experiencing. It makes sense if we can do it, let's do it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, which, Mr. Price, you're up again. It's an agreement for purchase of land between Layton City and Tyler Earl.
Thank you, Mayor. Every once in a while we get to bring a project to you that we believe is beneficial in multiple ways, and this is one of them. The property that we're discussing in the resolution affects is this one right here. It's Tyler Earl's property. He is interested in selling, the city is interested in purchasing. If you remember back in 2001, This is along Heather Drive here is where 6 homes were compromised because of a landslide. 3 were completely lost. Mr. Earl would like to sell the property. Through a series of negotiations, we came to a price of $20,000, and we believe that's a wonderful price. It does a couple things. First, it takes that lot off the market because this has continually popped up on for sale and often advertised as a beautiful home site. The second thing that it does, as you can see, is that this is the one location where we have a common boundary with the South Fork open space. And that's going to be a wonderful natural area for the citizens of Layton. And this purchase will allow us to provide a neighborhood access to that property. And so we're pleased to bring that to you today. The purchase price is $20,000 as I indicated. The tax assessment is very near that. And so we think that it's a good option for the city. Any questions?
Yeah, so what other ones are left then? They're privately held, all of them, or?
No, this is the one we're talking about this evening. We currently own this property. We acquired that, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And these are still privately held right here.
And the one south of the Earl one too?
No, there's a home on that one.
That
There's
one,
a house there,
yeah,
that
there's a
house is
home
still
there.
And I hear regularly from that gentleman about this property, so I'm glad to see this move forward if that's what you guys choose to do, because I think it's the right thing to do to protect that area. There's no way that that should be on the market.
So that'll be like a trailhead. Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, pretty simple. Thank you very much. Okay, that pretty much concludes them, other than our discussion regarding the funding. You want to jump into that? We got 20 minutes?
Okay.
No, we only have 18
A little less
minutes.
than that, yeah.
18 minutes. Break. No, go ahead.
So what we wanted to do, I've asked Steve Jackson to come and talk about some of the projects that, at least under the current standards, we're told that they're evolving very slowly. As you may recall, right now, the categories that have been approved, well, there's 4, but one of them is sewer projects, water projects, or broadband projects. We've been told by the League of Cities and Towns that there's a bill working its way through Congress that's been approved by the Senate but not the House that would expand that to transportation projects. I don't know the status of that right now, and these are for other industries or businesses that have been impacted by COVID. Our feeling, staff's feeling, based on prior discussions about this, is that the council has which we support, a real interest in recognizing this money. We're going to receive it whether it's appropriate or not. Editorial comment, right? And whether it's needed or not, but it needs to be well spent. It needs to be money that can be used to make significant improvements in the community that have enduring value. We're not just interested in spending the money. You're not interested in just spending the money. It needs to be for something that will benefit the community in the long run. And so you normally think about infrastructure, those kinds of things, again, given the limitations. So we know it's an open discussion. There hasn't been much movement hardly any movement in terms of getting more detail, but we want to at least bring this to you tonight after talking with the mayor and talk about some of the projects that at least have been percolating on a staff's radar that fit the current criteria. We're not suggesting this has to be this, obviously. We want to give you an idea of the things that we're thinking about, some of these, and then continue to take feedback from you on your feelings about it.
Quick question before you start the discussion. We have to have a plan. Is there a time limit for what the plan is and then a time limit for when you actually have to spend the money?
Yeah, I think yes. I think the way it's structured, correct me, Tracy, if I'm wrong, but I think that money has to be appropriated by end of 2024, and it has to be spent by the end of 2026. So there is a little bit of lead time to think through this and not go rushed, hopefully. But we think there are plenty of projects that could qualify. I think it's a matter of sifting through the potential projects and saying, this is one that really makes a long-term difference. And again, in all those areas, we have other funding sources, right? So it's
Well, and one of my concerns is obviously every other city have done Wasatch Fronts under those same time frames. So, I mean, if we can identify a project, we can get ahead of the curve, why not? Especially, like I said, when you're dealing with increased costs on everything, but the supply and demand and the labor costs alone, or the ability to complete the project by the deadline, to me is a concern.
So we'll jump into that. Steve, let's just go through that, and yes, just for discussion purposes and guidance.
Can you start something and then use those funds to pay for that? Like say in 2004 you send in, 2006 you gotta be done. 2003 you start a project, can those funds go backwards to pay for that? Does that make sense?
Most of that you can't do because there's federal requirements on the money. So we have to, for example, the labor that contractors use when they spend federal dollars have to meet the Davis-Bacon Act, which means the employees are paid a certain amount. The contractors track that weekly and actually submit reports on that. Okay. And so for us to go back on a we actually have to be on the front end so that when we have a contract for a contractor to sign, all those federal requirements are in that contract.
Yeah, but you can do that before, you know the federal.
Right, so we can do it on anything, say from here forward, but we can't do it on any contract that's already signed.
Well, yeah.
If they've already started, because.
No, but I'm saying because we've got 2004, I mean, 24.
Yeah.
That if we started it now, technically, we know what the ground rules are.
Right.
And could we use money from that to pay that back?
Sure.
Yeah.
So a good example of that is the 2700 West project. We talked about possibly using some of this money to help fund some of the current 2700 West project, but because of those federal requirements for the section from Gentile south to West Davis corridor, it just wouldn't work. But one of the projects that we've identified is the 2700 West from Gentile up to West Hillfield Road. There's about $1 million worth of eligible utility work in there with sewer, water, and storm drainage that we can use for that. If
we can start that earlier.
We're planning to do that project because we received $6 million from the county COG for that project, and so we're planning to just continue north. But with this money, because we're going to have to bid that second section, we will be able to, if we choose to spend that money in that way, we can put that requirement into the contract and use some of this money there. So there's about $1 million right now we've identified in that utility infrastructure. We did apply for some of the $50 million that the state had. Unfortunately, we asked for about $4.8 million. We didn't get anything from that list. There was a lot of good projects. We're hoping that maybe the list was so big that maybe the legislature will look and say, hey, maybe we can fund some more. But right now we don't have any state ARPA money coming our way. But
you know if there's been any discussion or research done on X amount of billions of dollars coming into municipalities from cities to states, a timeline saying you have to spend it by this, and a finite number of construction companies in the market.
And material shortages all over the place, and yes, the labor shortages. It's a concern. I'm not going to deny it. I don't know that I've seen any official reports about it, but yes, there is certainly the thought that if you're ready to go and you can get the contractors, you can front load them if that's a capability. But I also believe some of these projects are projects that we were going to do in 2024 or 25, and so if we choose to spend the ARPA money on that, I'm not
overly concerned that we can't find a contractor, but yes, there's a lot of that, and I don't know how much more may or may not come out of the other legislative discussions that people are talking about. So I mentioned 2700 West. I guess I don't really have a presentation to show you all these projects. I apologize. I've just got numbers to talk with you about. But there's a technology called automated metering infrastructure. We've talked about that a lot with the current drought and with the other advancements in technology and secondary water metering. There's a capability on culinary water meters to have automated meters that read remotely, and you can even get down to hourly or 15-minute interval times for people to be able to monitor their water use, and the city to be able to monitor that water use and really dial in kind of time of day uses and things like that for residents. A lot of the cities that have this infrastructure have a dashboard where customers can go and, if they run their laundry, they can see how much their laundry is used during that time frame. I mean, it's that kind of technical, but obviously that requires an update to the meters that the city currently has. So we've had a consultant look at the possibility of doing that. They've given us a cost of estimated about $4 million to put in a system like that. It would require some radio reading capabilities and things like that, but it would actually help Tracy and his group with the billing, because instead of waiting for people to read meters, we would just be able to read them remotely from the office, and then any issues that we had, our staff would go take care of those meters if they didn't read correctly or didn't respond. So it would take a lot of the guesswork out of that.
Tracy, what do you think the impact would be then on a lot of folks that are behind on their bills and they're constantly chasing the shutoffs, and that, do you think something like this would be able to bring that all down as well, so it's not so much work for the employees to turn those water off?
Maybe. We find that with the shutoffs, it's a lot of repeat offenders. I mean, you have a few that accidentally miss paying their bill, and we work very well with everyone, but obviously people that it's a first time or a one-time thing, we're really lenient that way. I don't know, it could help. I think it will mostly help people. I mean, we're running short on time, but I know where I live, they meter the Weber Basin water meters the secondary water, and my secondary water usage dropped in half because I know what I'm using. Before I had no idea what I was using, so just use whatever you want, right? And that was kind of the theory out there. But, it's a great tool for being able to know how much you're using in a timely manner. Right now we have a great tool out there that our IT department developed, but it's still not necessarily timely, right? I know what I used in June, but it's the middle of August. Right. So that it helps, but maybe helps me for next year, right?
Yeah, so some of the capabilities of these meters are that you could have a leak alarm that you could set up and say, hey, if it runs for this much time, you send me an email or a text or something like that. Or they could say, I'm approaching this tier, so if I'm in the 10,000 gallon range, I don't want to go over 10,000 gallons. Tell me when I've hit 80% of my allotment for the month or whatever. And so there's a lot more data to give people the information they need to be able to monitor and work on those things.
So this was focused on culinary. Is there any plan, especially for those of us that aren't even metered on our secondary water, that are wishing we were metered? Any plans to?
That is in the long-term discussion, and we're kind of waiting to see which direction the legislature goes on that. There's a lot of bills. Gary and his team are watching at the legislature with me, and but that is part of the discussion. Unfortunately, there's kind of a gray area right now where we're not quite sure that the secondary system fully qualifies for this ARPA money, and we don't want to be on the wrong side of that and then have to pay penalties or pay it back. And so that's part of why we're saying, hey, let's focus on the culinary system, but if there's revenue that can be used in other places, I think it opens up some of those options for us.
So I'm going to go quickly through the list.
Yeah.
If we won't be able to talk about it in great deal, it needs to, just a flavor. We're not saying AMI is most important from the staff perspective. We're just saying it's an example of something that could be done that's needed. Can we do that? Yeah. We can circle back and we'll have continuing discussions on it, but
Yeah, so another one is the drinking water well. We have a need for a drinking water well in the future. That would be about $3.5 million. Telemetry upgrades, so the telemetry system is what we use to monitor all of our tanks and our pressures and our pumps and everything in the system. And we have about $500,000 worth of telemetry upgrade needs that we have. It's kind of a really fancy computer system that has to be updated and refreshed as we grow. There's a sewer project on Gentile Street, kind of right at the top of East Gentile up around the golf course. There's a sewer line. It's about an $800,000 project that needs to have the sewer upgraded in that area. Not only for some additional growth that can occur there, but just the condition of the pipe is aging and needs to be taken care of. There's some water lines on Antelope Drive, about University Park Boulevard to the east, towards Lowe's in that area. That it's about an $800,000 water line project. That's a possibility that we could do. That one's one we're teeing up for this coming budget season to ask for funding on. A couple of storm drain projects in the Layton subdivision. It's one of the older subdivisions that doesn't have a great drainage system. That's about $1 million worth of storm drain work that needs to go on in there. Sandridge booster station and a new tank. That would be an additional $3.5 million. There's a site there for a booster station and then an additional tank that we've got master planned in. And then there were some backup generators that were funded in this year. We're trying to secure other money for that, but if that money doesn't come through, then the backup generators on our well houses and pumps would be a great project as well. So in total, I ran through that pretty quick, but that's $15.5 million. So I think we get 4.5 this year and another. Rob's smiling over here because he knows I can spend more than we've got, but $9 million, we can spend it in a hurry, and so it's really more, we need to do it right, and I believe this is a good comprehensive list, but if there's other thoughts and directions that we want to go, and if they open up other options for transportation, that changes a lot of the discussion as well. So, any other questions or?
one of the things we have to, no, not just going to add to it, if that's possible, but the question Don raised about secondary is because a lot of these projects are in master plans that exist, and there's a revenue stream there. There may be opportunity, the law allows it to be creative in mixing and matching those, right? And maybe we choose to use ARPA money on this, then that frees up other revenues that are being accumulated through the rate structure to do something else that is important but doesn't qualify for ARPA funds. Does that make sense? So you've got options is what we're trying to say. It's a matter of you helping us decide what the priorities are, and then we can, I think, put together a plan about, okay, we suggest we use this and this and this to fund that kind of a thing. But we're in a good place.
Yeah.
And we feel like we can really use the money wisely and benefit the community long term by it, not just spend it.
Good report. Thank you, everyone. This is a good meeting, and we've got 5 minutes ago. We can start the next one. All right. This meeting is now in order. We appreciate everyone to be here tonight for our Layton City Council meeting for December 16th. And we appreciate those in the audience that are here. As we do regularly, we do like to start out our meeting with a prayer and a pledge. And tonight I have asked for some assistance there since December's my month. And I thought it would only be appropriate since we do have the last meeting for a couple of our council members that perhaps we have Don's husband, Roger, would you mind giving the prayer? And then knowing that, you know, Tom served over the planning commissioner, we asked George Wilson to come up and lead us in the pledge. So we'll start out with our prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this snowy evening and for the moisture that we've been receiving. We're thankful for the opportunity of gathering in this free country and this kind of meeting where everyone has a say and everyone has the agency to express their opinion. We're grateful for the service of the mayor, the city council, and for the staff of Layton City. Grateful for all that they've done for this city and continue to do their diligent effort. We pray this night that everyone's mind will be open to those things that are discussed and that decisions will be made appropriately based on the law and ordinances and a good conscience. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. You can speak in the mic.
Ready? Okay. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both for participating in that. And I know Tom's family's here, which I acknowledge, as well as Don's, which I think is great. And this is going to be an interesting evening tonight. So council, we need to move on. Do any of you have any municipal announcements you'd like to share? Do you want to do minutes first? Oh, yes. Good correction. See, that's why I'm going to miss her. Okay, we do have one set of minutes that we need to approve from November 18th of 2021. So council, do you have any corrections to that? If not, I'll look for a motion.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of Layton City Council work meeting of November 18th, 2021 as written.
Okay, there's a second? Second. It's been seconded by Zach. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the meetings as written. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Now we can move on to municipal announcements. Does anyone have any municipal announcements they'd like to share with our folks online as well as those here tonight? Okay. I guess seeing that there's no municipal announcements tonight, the only thing I will state is that obviously our Layton Lights, our park is still up and running and it's been well received. We've had a lot of visitors this year, and I know going into this last week before Christmas, we anticipate even more. So please be patient in anyone that are staging to drive through so that we don't have any issues there. But certainly I'd highly encourage people to get out of their cars and walk through the park as well, because it's quite fun and enjoyable. We have the Elf on the Shelf game that goes on, and if you find the little elf, you go over to the Cocoa Shack, or we have a parks person out there that will give you a nice treat. And I know the Rotary Club is still selling hot chocolate tomorrow night
Saturday and Monday, and then that will be the end of their selling of the hot chocolate. So
In the end.
in other words, they're not going to be out there on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, but they could go next week.
I meant the hot chocolate. The Rotary will, Monday night is the last night they'll be selling hot chocolate. Okay.
They had the hayride.
They did.
Which was nice. It was packed. I mean, we were making people lay down and people step on them so we could get them all on. But no, it was well done. And the parks guys that did it were just very efficient, it was neat. It was just fun to be part of it. And so, you know, you missed it, but it was a great thing.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything? Okay, seeing that there's none, we'll go ahead and move on. We do not have any verbal petitions or presentations tonight. So I'll now open it up for any citizens' comment. So anyone who wishes to address the body here, please step up to the mic, state your name and address for the record, and then we'll listen to what you have to say.
Thank you, Mayor. It's always good to be first. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Scott Fletcher. I live at 2729 North, 2125 East at Layton, Utah. That's the bottom of the street of the Case Creek Parkway. So that's what I'll address today. I appreciate the opportunity to sit into the earlier meeting and to hear what was being said. A couple of items that I'd like to bring to bear. First off is appreciate the legal reading that was given in terms of the First Amendment rights as opposed to what's there. That was good. And I appreciate also that the options were brought forward in terms of compelling government interest was one of the options available, and I think we should pursue that. I mean, if you go back to the original in the May 2016 Layton City Parks, Recreation Trails, Open Space and Cultural Facilities Master Plan, it clearly states in one of the goals of the desire to have fundamentally a environmental preserve in that area. That's one. And it also has back in 2014, there was a review done by, I believe it's a professor from Utah State that did an assessment of the public sentiment, and there was 94% of the people wanted to have an open space area. So there's definitely a desire and a need for that open space. And as such, we would strongly recommend that the council take very quick action in terms of making recommendations in terms of that compelling government interest in terms of the environmental impact and also from a safety standpoint. Those were the two major ones that were there in terms of how to get there, how to resolve the issue. Another one was brought up was just restricting all commercial activities to all parks. We believe that's a solution as well and should be explored quickly as we move forward. So those are two options that we believe should go forward. I would like to propose maybe something in addition to that. At the Farmington Creek Trail, if you've walked down there, just east of Lagoon, if you walk around that trail, there are signs on every street that goes up and down that tree. So there's a precedent already set in a neighboring city of Farmington. And essentially what it says is that only residents and their guests are permitted to park on those streets, and that fines and or towing will occur if it's not obeyed. So there's a precedent already set for putting that in place. So that addresses a very significant issue of safety up and down that street. So last time we talked about, in fact, last time there was pictures shown of up and down that street and how dangerous that street can become. You know, Mayor, you and I talked about it afterwards. There could be as many as 100 cars with large groups walking up and down that street. Somebody's going to get hit, somebody's going to get killed, or somebody's little kid's going to get hurt. So there's a safety issue involved in that. I believe that's a solution, one of several solutions that can be moved forward in a very quick fashion. So the environmental and the safety, and I believe now we have the legal backing from that compelling government interest, as well as a safety approach going forward, as well as the idea of no commercial in any of the parks, which we would advocate for all of those. What I would like to close with is someplace that I'm very frustrated with. So we've been working this issue for a long time. We've been made a lot of promises in the area. Next month we'll have a sign. Next month it'll be taken care of. Next month we'll get an action. And no action has happened. Nothing has happened. And I think you should be frustrated as members of this council of the lack of inactivity. I work in the commercial world. If the same amount of activity happened for my job, I'd be fired. I'm incredibly disappointed in this council for acting so slowly. Now, I understand there's legal issues, and I understand that there's time issues. But regardless, those actions should be taken much quicker than what they currently have. So I appreciate what you've done, and I appreciate the legal representation that you brought today. But I think there's some action that needs to be taken on a very quick basis as we move forward. So thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Tawny Williams, and I live at 2718 North, 2125 East. I'm just right across the street from Fletcher, who spoke. And I don't know how this works, so if I can't, I didn't know if there was any way I could show 2 more pictures. Am I allowed to do that here? Can I show anyone these? The only reason that I want to show them 2 pictures, these are taken 2 months apart, and I live right by the trail. And we see the amount of damage that's being caused by the commercial photographers, and having a front row seat, it's the photographers, I promise it is. The general traffic that was in there, I've been by that trail for 10 years, and it wasn't until COVID and everyone was getting family pictures that the traffic got so bad. And we have, between our little group, we have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of group after group after group that's just getting trampled. And you probably can't see it. Can I walk around, or am I allowed to go into the circle?
I'd advise you to submit those. Yeah, we'll have you email them in, and then
May
it
I?
can be shared.
Perfect.
But go ahead.
Who do I
you
send
can
those
go ahead and
to?
describe them if
Okay,
you like.
so this one picture, it just shows some of the flattened area, and there's a tree marker that you can see, and you can see how trampled the meadow is becoming. Now, here's the problem is I don't think the photographers, bless their hearts, when they come in, they don't see what it was like before. And so when we see it getting bigger and bigger, and then the next picture I have, and they were literally 2 months apart from where it is on the tree, it's probably 5 times the size that's completely trampled. And some of the public parks, they can handle that type of traffic. The grass is fine. It's meant to be walked on, but the meadows just are not meant to handle that kind of traffic. And so this is another thing. I know it probably can't be answered at this meeting, but I would love to know who I could contact. I would love to just personally offer my own service. There's been plenty of service projects on the trail, and I would love to be able to stake out some of those areas just with flags that say, please don't cross these lines, to permit for some of the regrowth. Some of it has already turned to mud, complete mud, and now it's buried in the snow. But we even had some photographers down there today. It used to just be short seasons, and it's not anymore. And some of them are getting more bold. They've been driving their vehicles, and I know that that's completely illegal. Those signs are clearly posted to drive their couches down there for photography sessions. There's been one in particular that is a Grinch that will come. He's been there every week for 5-6 weeks, 5 weeks. Yeah. And will drive their truck on to the meadows to drop off a couch to have these sessions. And so we were kind of frustrated just watching it slowly die, because we know other people that aren't as familiar aren't seeing how bad it's getting, and the trails that are right to the same spots that they go to. And it's just around that parking lot, because there's a parking lot right there. They just hop out. It looks like they're in the middle of the mountain, which is why we love the park. And it's your own fault for making such a beautiful park. We love it so much, and they do such a good job of maintaining it. Dave does stuff to keep the thistle out. It's plowed, so we can even walk there in the winter. It's amazing, but I promise it will not last another season. I do not know. We already are going to have to put tax dollars in to get the growth back at this point. It just has to be done. So is there someone that I could contact to get permission for a service project, if that's permitted, to flag off some of those areas?
Yes, you can contact Mr. Dave Price. He's our Parks and Recreation
Yes,
Director.
and we've had extensive conversations about that. Is there someone above him that I can talk to about that?
You've
Or
already
is
given
he-
us your name.
Okay.
You don't have to say it publicly, but I'll have you give you your number to our secretary over here, and she'll take that, and somebody will reach out to you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing that there's no more citizens' comment, I'd like to go ahead and move on to item number 5, which is our consent items. And our consent items, we can actually act upon them in one single motion as far as acceptance or denial on them. But for the time being, I will go ahead and proceed in the order that is presented on the agenda. So we'll start out with item number A. And Mr. Probert's going to give us a review of our annual report for the fiscal year of June 30th, 2021.
Mayor, members of the council, pleasure to be with you here tonight. I'm here with Mr. Robert Wood from HBME, your independent auditors that you hire as a city council to review the finances of the city, as well as internal control and compliance. And so we now have put together our comprehensive annual financial report that'll be available on the website following this meeting, assuming that you accept the report as presented. The city finds itself in excellent financial condition. We have adequate reserves in all of our funds, general fund, water, sewer, storm, refuse, and many others. So again, in excellent financial condition. From what was anticipated at the beginning of the whole COVID pandemic to where we ended up today, we're in a really good position. Some of that has been a part of significant sales tax growth, and that's a good thing, but also reflective of what probably everybody here in the room could see as inflation. And so, not to get too excited about sales tax growth, because we know that costs have increased in personnel and the projects we want to accomplish and the equipment we have to buy and the supplies that we have. And so still we need to, we keep things very tight, and you approve a very tight budget and very responsible with all of those funds. I'll turn some time over to your auditor so that he can discuss the reports that have been issued.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here with you this evening. Appreciate what you all do in the city management for how they manage the affairs of the city. As Mr. Probert has mentioned, you've got healthy, strong fund balances going along all of your funds. There's a lot of projects, a lot of money, and so forth out there. This took a lot of time to put together and make sure it's done right. But that's one of the things that you as a city receive is excellence in your financial reporting each and every year. One of the items that we do is we have an independent auditor's report that's found on pages 7 through 11 of the annual comprehensive financial report that Tracy just mentioned. We have given you the best opinion as an audit firm can give your organization. It's an unmodified opinion. We don't feel there's any material misstatements in not only your entity-wide statements, but each of your governmental funds and some of your supplemental schedules. In addition to the independent auditor's report, we issued 2 other reports at the back of the book. One is on your internal control over financial reporting and also your compliance with state laws. The second report is required by state law because it's put together by the state auditor's office in the state compliance audit guide. And there's various things that we need to do from a compliance standpoint, or I guess you as a city need to do from a compliance standpoint, such as budgeting, your fund balance percentage in your general fund, governmental fees, how you handle restricted taxes, public treasurer's bonds, just a whole slew of items that we look at, some on a annual basis and some we do on a 3-year basis. Really, our report tonight is you have no internal control deficiencies. We didn't notice any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that needed to be reported. We did note 2 compliance requirements. The first one is your fund balance in the general fund. Now that is made up, but what they look at in your fund balance is they look at what you have as unassigned, assigned, and committed. You don't have any committed balance, but you do have some assigned fund balance and unassigned fund balance. That is compared to your general fund's operating revenues. Now, when we compare those, state code says that you could be between 5 and 35%. Currently, you're at 45.4%. So from our perspective, this is one we say this is a nice finding to have because it means you have some excess reserves. And as we heard earlier in the presentation, there's a lot of projects that the city can go ahead that will benefit not only the community, but the residents of the Layton city. So you probably actually have some projects that you can fund through your general fund. The second finding that we have is you have a component unit in your financial statements called the Davis Metro Narcotics Task Force. That's a component unit that's conglomerate of not only the Davis County Sheriff's Office, but other police departments that form this task force. You as a city are the ones that manage the affairs and operations of that department or workforce. They had an overage on their budget where they overspent by $7,538. Not material, but it really came about because they received a grant that increased costs for overtime covering salary officers. So it's not like the fund went over. They had a revenue source to cover it. Just not enough expenditures got picked up in any budget amendment. So those are the 2 findings that you have. Otherwise, we really feel that the city is in good hands. Any questions we can take?
Council, do you have any questions? How about some comments?
Just one question, Rob. You mentioned assigned, unassigned, and committed. What would be committed? What is that?
Committed is something you as a city council would do. So if you want to commit certain funds for a project, you could commit it for a project. It's almost like restricted, but it's not coming from an external source. It's coming from you as a council. You have to either do that through resolution or ordinance. And then in order to get rid of the committed fund balance, you have to do the same thing through a resolution or ordinance to allow the funds to be used.
Anyone else? Those are great findings. I mean, on behalf of the city and all the folks that have gone into maintaining this budget, I want to commend you all and commend you on your audit. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that in addition to the council here, we have 2 citizens that also sit on this audit committee so that to make sure that everything's done appropriately. And I want to extend my appreciation not only to them, but everyone, we've got several folks in our city that sit on the various commissions. And again, that's an extension of the council and we rely on them. And I think this is only appropriate to thank them for their time and efforts and what they do to help the city run so efficiently like we have. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there aren't any further questions, then staff would just recommend that the council accept the annual financial report as presented.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to item number B, and Mr. Chad Wilkinson will be presenting that information to us regarding a block grant warrant deed for Have a Heart.
Yeah, we'll get you out. Thanks. Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. This is Resolution 21-55 to approve a warranty deed transferring 552 South Kimball Drive from the city to Have a Heart. The city has a long relationship with Have a Heart and the Davis School District. Both of those entities build homes that are then transferred to low to moderate income families that meet certain criteria. This is a step in that process that this lot would be transferred to Have a Heart, which would then construct a home. This is the location of the property. If you remember, this was a remnant parcel from a development that came before you several months ago. And this was identified as an area that could potentially be a a home for one of these low to moderate income families. Have a Heart does a great job of building these homes. It'll be a quality home that will then be sold to a low to moderate income family at a reduced rate, so that it can be affordable housing for that family. We are recommending that the council approve and authorize staff to execute this warranty deed, transferring this property to Have a Heart, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
So I have one. I spoke to Morgan that there was an error in the contract date. Do you know if that got changed?
I'm sure that it did if you spoke to him. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just that the agreement ended. The date of the agreement was November 19th, but it said that the term of the agreement ran from November 19th through June 30th of 2021. So it just needs to be 2022.
Okay. Thank you for that, and I'm sure that was changed. But we'll note that for the record as well and make that change. So, any other questions?
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Being that you're at the podium, you get to speak again on item number C.
Thank you. Yes, this is a plat amendment. This is a subdivision plat amendment, Oak Forest phases 3 and 7. The location of the property is shown there on the map with the red dot. That's about 2287 north, 2575 east, and 2535 east, 2250 north. We've got the properties there outlined in red. This involves the amendment of 2 plats. We're going to show you those plats just really quick here. This is Oak Forest phase 7, or number 7, which includes lots 197 and 196 that will be part of this amendment. The next one is Oak Forest number 3, which includes the lots 68 and 69 from that phase. Sometimes we can do these types of adjustments through a property line adjustment process. However, this particular adjustment includes 2 subdivisions. We're crossing plat boundaries. We're changing those plat boundaries. And we're also changing some public easements. So we've gone through a subdivision amendment process. This is because there are 2 subdivisions involved. Again, there will be 2 separate plats to be amended. This is the first of those. This is Oak Forest Phase 7 First Amendment. You can see the 2 lots that are created. The lots will be renumbered because of this transaction. You can see those numbers on the plat there. There'll be a 7 designation for that in Phase 7. And then on the next one, this is Phase 3. So you can see the renumbering of those lots for Phase 3. I want to just show you a quick exhibit that shows kind of everything together here. So if you look at the colored portions of this is the lots as originally platted. You can see the original shapes of those lots there. And then that shown in the outline is what will occur as a result of this proposed amendment. So that just gives you a quick view of that. You can see that there's a lot of moving pieces here. Predominantly, for the purposes of this, there's a fence line that was established some years ago. This would adjust the property lines to match that fence line. It would also readjust some of those lots to take into account some improvements that have been made on these properties. All the resulting lots will be the minimum lot size for the zones. They'll still be big enough that they meet those minimum lot sizes and could be constructed on as lots. We'll just show a couple other things. This is just a quick, very rough, but approximate locations of those new lot lines. You can see the improvements on the lots related to those lot lines. Particularly, you can see the existing home. One thing that's a little bit unique about this particular application is that the applicant had requested that we expedite this. This is coming to you fairly quickly after Planning Commission. We had our Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday of this week, where they recommended unanimously recommended approval of this subdivision amendment. We did send out some minutes to the council earlier this week, so you could review that. Not a lot of discussion occurred at that meeting. It was fairly straightforward, but the staff is recommending that the City Council approve the proposed subdivision amendment for Oak Forest Phases 3 and 7, and be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Any questions?
I have a couple, and this one's kind of for Gary. Because it's not a public hearing or a public review and a consent item, there was no noticing time frame from Tuesday night to tonight?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. There wouldn't be.
No required
Okay.
notice. That would, yep.
All right, and then did this issue come about as a survey for the lots to be potentially sold? I mean, why after all these years do they decide they want to do this? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we've got a representative of the family here that is the applicant for the project. I'll give you just my brief overview of what was told to me, but if they want to add anything, they certainly could. But part of it is that, again, there was a fence line established that is not exactly following those originally platted lot lines, and it was a desire to put everything right, to match those existing property lines before any future sales of properties occurred. There's also there was a potential sale of the property. There's one property that's, and again, I don't have my mouse to show you, but that the smallest of the properties there that has the home on it on the northeast corner of this development is owned by a different party. So there's 3 of these lots are owned by one family, and then the one lot owned by another. Because of that potential sale, they wanted to get this cleaned up before any potential sale occurred, so that everyone understood where the property lines were, and that was established.
And both parties agree to this?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number D. Mr. Steve Jackson's going to present the agreement between Layton City and Holmes Creek Irrigation Company.
Mayor and Council, before you tonight is an agreement between Layton City and Holmes Creek Irrigation Company regarding the Holmes Creek Reservoir Outlet Pipe, Resolution 2156. The agreement authorizes Layton City to Layton City and Holmes Creek will enter into an agreement, if approved, in order to replace an aging outlet pipe on the Holmes Creek Reservoir. The pipe is in need of maintenance and other things. Holmes Creek Irrigation would like to upgrade their system, as well as Layton City's master plan includes this pipe in the master plan project. So in order to plan for the future, Layton City and Holmes Creek have had discussions regarding participation in this pipe replacement project. The city's current master plan seeks to have a 24-inch pipe installed, and that will serve the future of our master plan into the 2040 timeframe. So the agreement provides for the replacement of their current pipe with a new pipe, and the city will own and maintain that pipe into the future. Holmes Creek Irrigation will maintain the outlet control structure and the emergency relief valves for that project. So the city is participating by purchasing the pipe per the agreement, and then Holmes Creek will install and fuse the pipe, and then also grant an easement to Layton City to be able to maintain and operate that pipe into the future. So staff recommends that council adopt Resolution 2156, but I'd like to answer any questions if I could.
Go ahead.
The timeline again, if this is approved tonight?
If it's approved tonight, we'd like to actually order the pipe as soon as possible. There's about a month of lead time on the pipe right now, and then we would like to construct as early as we can to be ready for the April water season. So the anticipation is a pretty quick turnaround if this is approved.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
No. Must have did a good job in our work meeting. Okay, we have one more item left on our consent items, and Mr. Dave Price will present the agreement for a purchase of land between Layton City and Tyler Earl.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Resolution 2157 to purchase real property at 1369 East Heather Drive. As you're aware, in 2001, 6 homes that were located on Heather Drive were damaged due to landslides. 3 of them had to be demolished. This property, located in the pink, is identified as the Tyler Earl's property. He desires to sell. The city is desirous to purchase this property, and we've reached an agreement on the price. We believe this is a good addition to the city because number one, it takes that lot off the marketplace, and it also provides the connectivity to the 16-acre East Ridge Nature Park. And so it will be an ideal location for a neighborhood access to that point. So staff recommends that the council adopt Resolution 2157, approving and the agreement for the purchase of land between the city and Tyler Earl
and authorizing the mayor to sign the necessary documents. Any questions?
Any questions, council?
Ask one.
Okay.
You called it the East Ridge Nature Park. What's that?
I'm sorry?
Is it South Fork Nature Park?
It is on the South Fork. The name, the East Ridge was the development name, I believe. The name of the area has not been determined yet.
What's the plan for that? What the timeline or time frame in the master plan?
This spring, we should take ownership of that property as it's deeded over to the city.
But the park?
The park itself is currently already funded through impact fees, and we'll begin to develop that as soon as we are able to.
So if this is going to be a trailhead down, what's the grade down to get to?
It's steep.
It's going to be kind of like the one up on Sunset that goes down to Case Creek off of Sunset Drive?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as steep as the Sunset one, and if we traverse to the west from this location, it's not as bad as if you just drop off the edge.
If you go up there, you'll get your steps in. So for the day, you'll be fine.
And again, we are working with the developer to provide a vehicle access and parking lot on the opposite side of this area. And so this is intended for the neighbors in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, I was pleased when you brought this before us because I know that we've talked about it for many times and it was in the original parks plan. And then I'm very thankful that Mr. Earl's willing to sell it to us now so that we can continue with that and again, take the lot off the market because I probably get a call. I get several calls on this. So I'm sure Mr. Bench will be very happy to see whatever action we take tonight. So anyway, okay.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. Okay, council, that concludes our consent items. So I will look for a motion regarding the consent items. And as I mentioned earlier, we can act on one single motion here. So would one of the two departing council members care to make this motion?
She's a pro. They're going to miss me. Will you second it when I'm done then? Okay, so Madam Mayor, on the consent agenda items, I make a motion that we approve the following. The comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th of this year, the community block grant warranty deed for Have a Heart Resolution 2155 for a home at 552 South Kemble Drive, an amended subdivision plat in Oak Forest Phases 3 and 7, an agreement between Layton City and Holmes Creek Irrigation regarding the Holmes Creek Reservoir Outlet Pipe Resolution 2156, an agreement for the purchase of land between Layton City and Tyler Earl Resolution 2157 at 1369 East Heather Drive.
Very good.
I'll second.
Great. It's been moved in second that we accept the consent items as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. They all pass unanimously. Okay, I'm looking at our agenda here, and we do not have any public hearings. However, I believe we do have some unfinished business that we need to take care of. So, as I mentioned earlier, and from this time forward, I mean, it's we've had two great council members here that's served your city well. Sorry, I wasn't going to do this, but... So I just personally want to say thank you. I'm not going to carry on a lot, but, you know, in the past, we really haven't done much. Well, I shouldn't say that. I apologize. We have done things for the council, but we really haven't shared some of the, you know, the camaraderie that has taken place. And that was really the meaning of the video, was so that you know, folks can see how this council really gets along, and also the council in the past. But we have 2 council members here that, like I said, have served our city so well. We have Councilmember Day, who's been on the council for 8 years now, and Councilmember Dawn Fitzpatrick, who has stepped in, and she's served 2 years, but she's certainly given a lot to the city and a lot of other capacity in what she's served in. So I think that as the current council, we'd like to take a moment and thank each one of them and let them know how much we do appreciate them. I know with Tom, when we first got on the council, I know we had several items that we wanted to accomplish, and I think that with tonight's action, we actually accomplished probably the biggest item that was on our agenda at that time, and that was to deal with the water. And it's taken 8 years, and tonight was a night that this council accepted the agreement with Case Creek, with Case Creek. And, you know, that's quite monumental. That's actually very historical, as Gary and Alex would attest to, to think that we finally was able to bring that to fruition here. On another note, and I'm only going to talk about 2 items on each of them, so don't think I'm going to recap the entire 8 years here. But also Utopia. When we took office, you know, Utopia was kind of fragmented at the time, and it really took some energy and effort, and not only on behalf of the council, but several members. And we were able to bring that to build out within our city. And as Councilmember Morris reported tonight, you know, it's starting to pay off. So, Tom, I think you should be proud of those 2 accomplishments. And Dawn, in a short time, you accomplished a lot. Probably the one that's I'm going to say is most admirable is our change to our landscaping laws, especially with the water situation and the drought. You know, she really kind of helped push that forward so that we accepted not necessarily xeriscape, but really kind of recognized that it's time to kind of change some of those ordinances and make sure that we, you know, we're in the forefront of conserving water. I know you've been great in helping me with the youth. You've stepped up. You've was able to get our youth council back focused in the right direction, and you've spent a lot of time there with them, and I'm excited. I mean, you've given them good guidance, and these kids are doing a lot of good things in a short amount of time. But I can't help but say I'm probably going to miss all of the your ability to find all the small details that are monumental as far as all of our whether it be a spelling or a grammar or a date correction. I mean, you amaze me on how you can go in and proofread everything. But that tells you how dedicated she is to the city and making sure she does what's right. So I'm actually going to stop talking for a moment and allow the other council members, as well as hopefully anyone else who would wish to express their appreciation to these 2 council members who have served the city well. So with that, council, do you have any comments you want to add?
I'm not going to cry. I save that for other occasions, like my birthday and, you know, big stuff. We haven't really served that long with them, a couple of years, known them for many other years, but in all honesty, I've changed my mind on a couple of things, and working with them did that. You know, I thought different things of them. I thought they thought differently. I didn't agree with maybe some of the things they agreed with. But when I found out why, it was kind of neat to know that they would stand up and say what they felt. And to me, that's the greatest honor in the world, is to say what you feel because you feel it's right. And so it's been a privilege. I know you're not going anywhere except on a tractor. You may go on a trail. I won't see you on the trail, but I might see you on the tractor. And but I just want you to know it's been a privilege for me, and I've appreciated it more than I thought I would have. So thank you.
Well, I've only served 2 years with these two wonderful public servants, but with Councilman Day, I feel like Councilman Day was my introduction to the city because I got elected and no one knew who I was and I didn't know who anyone else was. And Councilman Day was the first friend I had on the council. He was the first friend I had here, and he talked to me through things. He explained things, how things should be, and we may not have always voted the same way, but I respected his decisions, and it helped me understand his issues a lot more. And I'm a better member of the city council because of being able to sit next to you, Councilman Day. So and now, since I moved, I consider you my neighbor, because I can see you out in my backyard. My kids can see out your backyard, out my new backyard, while you were out there on your tractor. So I'm going to force my son to come out and help you and learn some hard work that maybe I should have learned when I was his age. But you're a great public servant, Tom, and I'm going to miss sitting next to you, but I know that the city is better for having you served here. So I appreciate all that you've done. And with Councilmember Fitzpatrick, one of the this isn't going to surprise anyone, but the most thorough email I received when I was running for political office was from a citizen named Don Fitzpatrick. And I remember being like, that was an amazing letter. I showed it to my wife. I said, this lady knows what she's doing. Why isn't she running? She knows more about the city than I'm ever going to be able to know. And I answered her back our questions. I don't know if she ever voted for me. That doesn't matter. Because when I was elected, there was an open spot on the city council. And my first vote as a city council member was to appoint a new person to the council to serve with. So not just to vote for someone because I liked them, but I was going to vote for someone that I wanted to work with. And one of the names on the list was that same name, Don Fitzpatrick. So I did my research. I called a bunch of people who had worked with her, and everyone said the same thing. She was thorough. She was dedicated. She was caring. She really cared about the city. And I've found all of that to be the truth. And so I've got to know Don, and I would allow Don, my wife would too, to watch our kids, which we don't say a lot, because my wife says, if Don's watching them, they're going to be taken care of. They're going to be healthy and well. They're going to be healthy when we get them back in the evening. So I was disappointed when both of them decided that they didn't want to seek another term. But I'm excited to see what else they can accomplish. And so I'm pleased to know you and call you as a friend, Don, and certainly going to miss serving with you.
These are tough jobs and a lot of hours, and you have to take this serious. And Tom has done just that, not only in these meetings on this night, but also with the Planning Commission and being in all of those meetings and being the advisor there. He probably knows more about the projects and has known more about the projects than any other. And I appreciate his how he thinks. And again, we probably haven't agreed on a lot of things over this time, but his heart's in it, and it's a good heart. And thank you, Tom. And I echo what Zach mentioned. The city's better for your service, and I wish you well. Similar with Dawn story, that my first interview was with Dawn when I decided to run the first time, which was, it took a couple of runs to get here. And she interviewed me for 2 hours right outside here, if you remember. And she loves this city and didn't want these seats to go to someone who didn't know what they were doing and didn't have their heart in the right spot. And I from that moment on, I knew I had a friend. And she's the example of a public servant as well, not only in this spot here for the last couple of years, which I was proud to and happy to vote for her as well, but also on the planning commission. She served as the chair. She's all 9 years there. Even before that, she served in various capacities in the safety area, and she's given her heart to this community as well. And happy to call her my friend, and I'm going to miss her. But her and Roger get to go and do some fun things, and I wish her well. Thanks, Don.
Do you care to comment over there?
Sure. Pardon? No, it won't be scary at all. It's a privilege. Thank you for the mayor for the opportunity to say a couple of words. I would echo largely the comments that have been made by the individual council members, and I think some people may realize, maybe a lot of people don't realize, that I think a lot of the credit for the good things that have happened in the city over the years is because the elected bodies in the city have been politically stable over the years. And even though there's, as has been the case with this council, there's divergent opinions and differences of opinion and a healthy debate about ideas and about priorities and choices, at the end of the day, as has been spoken of, everybody that is here loves the city and wants the very best for the city. And I think that's out of that compromise and out of that conflict sometimes comes good decisions. It's very healthy, and it's always been done with decorum and with appreciation for other people's perspective. And I think that's been a benefit of the city. Maybe an editorial comment, I think today the inclination is, if you're in elected office, for a lot of people, is to be a politician first and a leader, statesperson second. And I think both Tom and Don have been examples of people who think independently and they speak independently, and you understand that their motives are pure. They're doing what they believe is right, even if there's disagreement with other council members on it. They have the courage of their convictions, and to me, that's a very, very important quality that we need a lot more of at local level and state level and national level, is people who will do that. And just a lot of these two, I think especially, have brought a lot of common sense, life experience to the decisions that have been made by the council. So it's been a privilege for the staff to work, Tom, with you and Don with you as well. And to always know that regardless of your perspective and opinion, it was what you generally believed was the very best for this city. And we recognize that and appreciate that and honor that. And you've met the measure of any man or woman, I think, at the end of the day is have you left something better than you found it? And I think the answer in this case is a resounding yes to both of you. So thank you, and best to you going forward in your families.
And the attorney gets to speak.
Do I get the last? No. Well, I just wish that these two would have been more vocal in expressing their opinions. They've been such quiet individuals on the council that I really haven't known where they stood at any particular time, just so you know. Just the opposite. I appreciate the fact that they are very, very well spoken and outspoken. And often they have guided and directed policy in the city through some very difficult courses. I knew I had problems a long time ago when my wife and her sister were helping Dawn decorate a table at a wedding. And they had decorated the table, and I remember my wife thought it was a great job, and then Dawn came in and rearranged everything all over again. And I thought, yeah, that's Dawn. she'll come in and she'll rearrange everything all over again, but it always looks better. Always is in a better position. I think one of the main things that I admire about her as I watched her, she went through the general plan process. Mm-hmm. And what a dedicated person to really caring about what Layton looks like, and not just today, but down the road. I think you've invested probably a lot of your life in that, and I'm worried that you lost about 10 years of your life during that process. But anyway, I hope you and Roger have many good years together, notwithstanding that. And then Tom, I've always imagined him on the back of a tractor. Every time I see him at a meeting, I think he'd probably rather be on the back of a tractor, especially if the sun hasn't gone down outside, right? But Tom has had a particular place on this council in dealing specifically with issues that are so important to us, and that is the agricultural side of things, helping us to look at that, helping us to look at things like water. And so those are all things that make you leaders. I could list a number of things that I admire. The thing I like most about you is that you always listen to the city attorney, which is probably, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You've seen Don sometimes say, "What are you talking about? That's not right." But yeah, so I'm very, very grateful to the two of you. And, when it all comes down to it, exactly what Alex said is the case with this council, and that is you may differ a lot on the way that you want to address something, but in the end, you're all marching in the same direction. That's been the reason that this council has been so effective, is because you'll put aside your own personal preferences and you'll march with the council after you've had an opportunity to give your side of the story. So thank you. Thank you all for being one of the best councils I've ever seen. So thank you.
Very well said. Well, I do have some items for you, but would either of you want to take a moment before I presentations? Dawn? Ladies first. That's what Tom's trying to give you, the look.
The look. I'm going to miss that look, Tom. Hey, Joy. Need to keep my composure here. My husband keeps asking me if I had regrets for not running. And at times I do, about this much. But sitting here right now with these other individuals, I'm going to regret not being here the first meeting in January with you all. You've become really great friends. I think that we'll always be that council. We've served together, not as long as I think I personally would have hoped, but life takes you in ways that you just need to follow your heart, and the decision not to run was following my heart. But I will say that the 15 years that I've had here at the city have been wonderful. Working with, way back with Jim Mason. I miss Jim. Jim was a wonderful individual, working with emergency preparedness, with the PD, with Chad's group, the 9 years on the Planning Commission. I learned so much. And then the 2 years here, I've learned even more, because land use is only half of what the council does. I thank staff for guiding me and answering my questions. I know Alex thinks I was kind of needy at times, but I always wanted to make sure I knew the answer to the question. I didn't want to come into this meeting ever not being fully clear on what it is that we were looking at. And I just want to say that I want to wish the three of you that are staying the best. You might see me in the audience occasionally. Bettina and Tyson, you're going to do great. But at this point, I want to take a special minute and just thank the mayor for the support and the confidence that she's had in me to give me some assignments that put me kind of out of my comfort zone, way out of my comfort zone. And like tonight after this meeting is way out of my comfort zone. It's cold out there, and we're going to be going out and doing lights. But you never know what she had up her sleeve for us to do. But I may have kind of some days like, I don't really want to do that. But once I went with her, I was grateful that she extended the opportunity for us to be able to get out and meet the citizens. COVID really, I mean, that was one of our first responsibilities, was kind of to shut the city down as the new council, and not knowing where budgets money was coming from. And we've never done a budget. It was a scary thing to go in 2020 with that pandemic hanging over our head. And I'm glad that we've come through it. As been said, I love my city. I've had multiple opportunities to move elsewhere, but I've chosen to stay here and to retire here, to be buried here. I'm not leaving. And I'm just glad that I've had a part in helping direct a little bit of the future of it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thomas.
I might be buried in Kaysville, though.
I'd like to adjourn the meeting.
Just a couple of quick words. I appreciate the comments that have been made. I appreciate working with council, the staff, everybody here that we see on a weekly basis, and not only here in the meetings, but I'd especially like to thank all of the I'll call them the unheralded employees of the city and the volunteers that really are the ones that make this city go around, whether it's the guy out fixing a water line in the middle of the night or the custodians that we frequently visit here at night. To me, they're the people that really make this city go. It's those people that come every day, just do their job, and there's one looking in the window that we always see. But those are the people that I'd really like to
you might as well join us.
And they're the ones to me that really make the city go around. It's not us, it's them that keep it going. And really like to thank them. I'd like to thank my family. I wasn't expecting them here tonight, but I guess after 8 years, they could show up at least once. So I appreciate them here and the support they've given me. But most of all, I'd like to support those people who voted for me and gave me this opportunity, because without the voters, I wouldn't be here. And it has been a great opportunity. And I have really overall enjoyed the opportunity to serve in the city. And thank you to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. And like Dawn said, you never know what's up my sleeve, but we do have a couple of items that we'd like to, departing gifts that we'd like to share with these two. And
I'm sure
Alex.
there'll be some pictures.
Oh, I already showed the pictures.
No, you'll be wanting to take more.
One of the pictures is of a buffalo.
Oh, no, we do. We need a picture of you with your family up here. So, actually, Alex, I'm going to call you out. Do you want to come give them the little white box we have on the table over here?
Is it
See,
some of
he's
that
caught
extra
by
$1 million
surprise,
we
too.
have? Is it some of the extra $1 million we have?
It was a setup.
Thanks for everything.
Okay, you guys could open it if you'd like. Yeah, it is. It's Christmas tonight. What they are opening is, we got them a nice crystal clock that actually has their name on it, the title, and the amount of years of service they've have served on the council, not for the city, but on the council. And so we just want to say thank you. That's on behalf of everyone here at the city. Okay. Trying to think of who I should call on next. How about Zach? There's a couple of frames back here I think we need to share. One of you have got to hold it up so the rest can see what's going on. Okay, as they say, they never know what I get them into, and I appreciate their spontaneousness and willing to take a fun Christmas photo every year. So this is a picture that we took this year for our Christmas card that we give out to the employees. And as pointed out, we needed a decent picture of all of us. So we've actually got a nice council picture there as well. And we've had all the department heads sign the mat that goes in there. But the reason why they are not framed is because you two need to sign each other's photos. So Don, I've got a pen for you. Tom, I've got a pen for you. And you get to sign each other's frames so that you have all the signatures of the council members that you served with. And then we have one more fun item. And I think I'll do that one.
Sure.
Unless.
No, you take all the fun. I don't want to change the meeting.
I want to say that I was also lucky to have a son sign my frame.
Okay, Dawn, you're first up. And you need to come down here. And what I'd like is probably her family to gather right up in here for her. You can come around. Chris. Yeah, if you're family, you need to get up there. Okay, so as many of you know, at the city, it's quite an honor to be able to get one of our city signs. And it isn't something that's given out freely. I mean, you definitely have to put in your time and earn one of these signs. And I chose this year to go with the first names. You know, in the past, you usually do last names. But I thought, yeah, Fitzpatrick wouldn't fit on the sign without anything in front of it or behind it. Besides, we don't have an F word for Elaine, not that type of word. Nice try. I knew where you were looking at. Usually we go like a lane or a drive or something like that. So with that, Dawn, you have your very own Dawn Drive. So if you could go over by your family and let's get a nice photo of them showing up tonight as commemorating this last night. Okay, thank you. And thank you for being here, showing your support. You guys are great. I know you have always showing your support for Dawn, and I appreciate that. So now, with the rest of the people in the audience, please rise and come up. No. In other words, we got Tom's family here, and I'm going to do the same. You guys need to come up. You need to be in the circle here, because this was probably the one time I get to have all of you here, and I appreciate that, especially Tom's mom and dad. Okay, come on. Don't let Tom be the only leader there. You're lucky I didn't get you on the phone, or she would have been up here. Hey, Bill. Hey, you guys made it. I love it. Good job. No peeky.
How many up there are you?
So this is Tom's family, and I don't know, do you want to introduce him, or should...
Huh? I haven't got a sign yet.
He's going to get in there, believe me. But with Tom, I thought it was, I know that, you know, Tom's quite the outdoorsman, and we've never really identified a sign, I think, like this before, but I thought it was only appropriate that, again, we take the first name and we call it Tom's Trail. So, Tom, get in there with your family and take your picture. Because like I said before, you know, there's like the drive, the parkway, the lane. Oh, come on, get in the middle. So I want to thank everyone for putting up with me, quite honestly, but and for that, we do have some cookies here that we'd like you all to share in. But before we can adjourn, remember, this is just my unfinished business, so I still need a motion to adjourn our city council meeting for tonight.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Okay. Thanks for being here, you guys. Good job.